Here I am again with another set of stories, so please consider subscribing to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. And while you're at it, click the notification as well. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Story 1, tell you what this song is about? Okay, but you're gonna have to sit down for this. So I have a coworker who would put Spanish music on in the BOH and it would be the most raunchiest trap music ever. I'm talking about Bad Bunny, Karol G, El Alfa, kinda raunchy. Even some merengue and bachata hits are insane when I hear it as an adult. And yes, there would be people just ignoring the music, and then there would be others that want a translation. Well, the Latina coworker doesn't speak English really well, so she wasn't able to explain it, so they look at me for answers. I would usually tell them that it's just a bunch of nonsense and the songs are designed for you to turn up, and that would usually get them to leave me alone. Not this nosy coworker though. She was keen to know what a certain song is about. When I told her my usual spiel, she didn't want to hear it. She wants to know the meaning behind the song Mesa que Mas Aplauda and why the singer keeps saying socks, socks, socks. I told her that we, Latinos, don't look too deep into the lyrics, but if she wants to know, the guy isn't saying socks, 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 he's saying za, which means absolutely nothing at all, and when he said la mesa que mas aplauda lu mando a la nina, he's saying the table that claps the loudest gets the girl. She was instantly uncomfortable, but nah sis, if you wanna know so much, I'm gonna explain it further. I told her that they play this song in strip clubs, birthday parties, weddings, communions, quinceañeras, and just any random occasion. So for the rest of the shift I would tell her what every song is about just to make her uncomfortable. El Vineo is about this guy gaslighting his girl after she heard rumors about him being a player. Obsession is about this guy being a creep towards this girl who doesn't want him, and he's trying to convince her to leave her man for him. 4K is just a raunchy song about giving it to these hoes in 4K like they're P0RNO girls, and by the time I left she looked like she could have lived the rest of her life without knowing all that. I can't wait to tell her what Delinquent is about tomorrow. I bet she'll clutch her pearls. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me. Story 2, don't like the way I park? Fine. I'll follow the rules exactly. A couple of months ago, I had a run-in with the self-appointed HOA enforcer of my neighborhood. Let's call her Linda. For context, I don't live in an HOA community, but Linda likes to pretend we do. She's the kind of person who leaves passive-aggressive notes on cars, knocks on doors to complain about lawn heights, and calls the city for violations that don't actually exist. The issue started because I parked my car on the street in front of my house. It's perfectly legal, and I've been doing it for years without any complaints. But apparently, Linda decided that my car was an eyesore. One day, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper that said, "This is not a parking lot. Park in your driveway like a respectful neighbor. Don't make me involve the city." It annoyed me, but I shrugged it off and kept parking where I always do. That wasn't good enough for Linda. The next time, she confronted me in person. "Linda, I've told you before, parking on the street is inconsiderate. You have a driveway, use it." Me, "It's legal to park here, and I'm not blocking anything." Linda, "It doesn't matter. It's ugly and makes the neighborhood look bad. Park in your driveway, or I'll report you." That's when I decided, fine. If she wants me to park in my driveway, I'll park in my driveway, but I'll follow every single rule to the letter. You see, my driveway is small. If I park my car in it, it blocks the sidewalk. Technically, it's against city ordinances to obstruct the sidewalk. So the next day, I pulled my car right into my driveway, perfectly centered, and guess what? It completely blocked the sidewalk. It didn't take long for Linda to notice. She marched up to my door, red-faced and furious. "Linda, you can't block the sidewalk. That's illegal." Me, "Oh, I thought you wanted me to park in my driveway." Linda, "Not like that. Park properly." Me, "There's no other way to park in my driveway without blocking the sidewalk. Guess I'll have to park back on the street then." Her face was priceless. She sputtered for a moment before stomping off. Thinking that was the end of it, I parked back on the street. But no, Linda wasn't done yet. She actually called the city on me. A week later, a city inspector came by. He checked out the situation, saw that my car was legally parked on the street, and told me I was doing nothing wrong. However, he did mention that Linda had made several complaints about code violations in the neighborhood, and they were getting tired of her nonsense. After that, I didn't hear from Linda for a while, until last week, when she started parking her car on the street in front of my house. So, I did what any good neighbor would do. I called the city and reported it. Turns out her car was slightly too close to a fire hydrant. She got a ticket. Malicious compliance never felt so sweet. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me. Story 3, describe the food? You got it, boss. Many moons ago, I worked at a restaurant that is part of a national chain named after a fruit and an insect. I had put in my 2 weeks' notice after finding a better position elsewhere, and we were about to slightly tweak our menu, and so were having mandatory staff meetings to acquaint ourselves with the new food. The only time that we could schedule these meetings was in the morning, prior to the restaurant opening, so that all the staff could attend. As a closing bartender who would sometimes be there until 2 or 3 a.m. cleaning up, I did not relish having to turn around and go back to work just for an hour long untipped, earning just minimum wage, meeting on less than 6 hours of sleep. Since I was on my way out the door and would not be employed by them when the new menu actually started, I asked my boss if I actually had to come to these meetings. He told me, if you want to work your remaining scheduled shifts, you do. Being a college student who lived paycheck to paycheck, I could not afford to lose out on a week and a half wages, so I sucked it up and went. Part of the rollout was a booklet we were supposed to fill out about the menu items, which included the prompt, "How would you describe this dish?" Presumably you are supposed to come up with clever, tantalizing romanticizations of the items. Stuff like, it's a 1/4 pound of Angus beef, smothered by melted cheese and tender onions, but there were no specifics about what you could or should not write. Cue malicious compliance. I sat slightly out of my manager's line of sight and looked up the nutritional values of the menu items from our corporate website on my phone. I filled my notebook out as follows. The classic bacon cheeseburger has 1320 calories, 140% of your daily saturated fat, 28 grams, and 124% of your daily sodium, 2,860 milligrams. The BS Mushroom Swiss Burger has 1580 calories, 155% of daily recommended saturated fat, 31 grams, and 126% of your recommended sodium, 3,100 milligrams. The Quesadilla Burger has 1580 calories, 190% of your daily saturated fat, 38 grams, and 191% of your daily recommended sodium intake, 3,470 milligrams, etc. The next day my boss called me into the office to discuss my booklet. He asked, "Are these the real nutritional facts numbers?" I replied, "You're the manager, you should know, but yes. I pulled them right off the company website." He said something along the lines of, "God, that's disgusting. I should be looking for a new job too. We shouldn't be selling this shit." I worked the end of my shifts and then came back as a customer a week or 2 later. I proceeded to order a pitcher of the strongest beer we had on tap for myself, and then loudly played trivia with some of the bar regulars who were my buddies, asking them the same nutritional facts about the food. The bartender, my former coworker who was a stuck-up bee, kept giving me dirty looks, but she couldn't say shit to me, since I wasn't the loudest one in the group, and we weren't discussing anything vulgar. Note to everyone: the food at Apricot Beetles is really unhealthy. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me. Story 4, oh, we're changing procedures, again? You got it, I work in tech support, but basically a call center fixing computer problems. So when someone calls, we record their information. Everything from their name, to the reason for the call, to the solution. During a team meeting, one of my higher-ups, we'll call her Paula, announces if a client calls back about the same problem in a short time, whoever ultimately fixes it gets full credit for the work. For context, I'm not here to be super IT. I don't care about the credit. I work my 8 hours a day and collect my check. That's it. One day I get a call. The client says they were just on the phone with someone else, and they told them to call right back. I look up the coworker's name, John. He just went to lunch. I ask the client if they want me to transfer them to the John's voicemail. They say, "Can you just help me?" NP. I'm familiar with their problem and fix in it 20 minutes. I adjust the record for the problem to my name. I add John's name as a footnote so he still gets partial credit. Fast forward, John gets back from lunch. Comes up to me and demands to know why I took his name off the record. Tells me he spent an hour on the phone with that client and he would appreciate if I would let him know if I touch his records. Mind you, John and I don't speak. He's cold towards me and we only interact when absolutely necessary. Today, he doesn't even say hello. He just starts in on me. I wait a moment and calmly explain how I got the call, the client didn't want to wait, and how I followed procedure. I also pointed out that I added John's name as a footnote for partial credit, which is not required to do. John says, "Oh, I didn't see that," and leaves. No apology, just a mumbled thanks as he walks away. In our next team meeting, our boss tells us from now on, whoever speaks to the client first gets full credit. I asked her to please clarify because Paula told us otherwise. She reiterates the announcement, says this is how we're doing it. I hope that makes sense and quickly moves on. I can see where this came from, but I hold my peace. More background. John's approach is to rush through calls to increase his calls taken metrics. My approach is to make sure the client is taken care of before the call ends. So a few weeks go by, and things took an unexpected turn for John. When a client calls back for a problem that was previously marked fixed, I restart the record and only add my footnote. This causes the record to go back into the original agent's workflow for processing. Since John doesn't take the time to read the footnotes, he's reaching out to me for updates before he marks the record fixed again. I take my time to respond, because I've already made the info available in my footnote. Not only that, some problems require him to call the client back to confirm the problem is actually fixed. He went from talking to me once a quarter to once a week. So now, he's doing twice, sometimes 3 times the work, all because he wanted full credit for partial results. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me. Story 5, a story about chips. A long time ago I worked weekends in a warehouse that received chips in bulk. Think like one truck shows up all one flavor, where workers loaded up other trucks with the orders going to individual stores. So think of pallets of chips in boxes stacked 30 feet up and trucks in docks being loaded up with a mix of chips of all flavors going out to convenience stores and grocery stores. Our job as pickers is to push around a large cart and pick boxes of chips of all flavors as we go around the warehouse. Then we load out order into the truck and go to the next order and so on. When we dropped a box and a bag burst open, well, we would eat it. There would always be at least a couple open bags we could munch on at the warehouse. I only worked weekends. During the week, a lot of things would happen and I would only find out about changes the next weekend. One weekend I show up and we are not allowed to eat chips anymore. Apparently a new manager was hired and he was on a power trip and told the guys the next person I see eating our chips will be fired for theft of company property. This seemed to me to be a little ridiculous as they would also make us compact hundreds of cases of chips when they came to be too close to their expiry date, like less than 6 weeks. There was a lot of waste, so for them to get on our case for eating a measly bag of chips was a little infuriating. Anyway, I don't need to tell you that the guys were pissed about this and morale was low that weekend. Next weekend I come back in. The guys let me know that the manager is in a super bad mood. The workers devised a plan to get back at the manager. They would buy chips from our main competitor brand and eat that competitor's brand of chips as they worked. They argued to management that since it was from another brand, they could not get in trouble for theft as it was 100% certain the chips had been purchased with their own money. Now the management of the warehouse was appalled by the fact that we were all munching on the competition's goods, but there was nothing they could do about it. It took a few weeks for this situation to get resolved, but the way they fixed it in the end is that the managers would put a sticker on some bags for us to eat. In the end, we would be allowed to munch on the company products once the bags had been approved to be eaten by management. So then it was not considered theft anymore and we were able to resume eating from the company stock. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me. Story 6. We are working too fast? Okay, we will slow down for you. I recently found this sub and I think I have a great story for it. This happened about 2 years ago. I work in construction, but more specifically I cut concrete. A lot of people aren't familiar with my job, but all you really need to know is that I don't pour any concrete. I use big diesel and hydraulic-powered saws to cut and remove it. I work at a relatively small company, 15 employees, and we are the company to use for concrete cutting and removal in our area. I was the first employee hired at this company, and my bosses are amazing. They have been in the industry for 25 and 30 years respectively. We will call them Brad and Cody. They know what they are doing and they still get out and work in the field and will outwork any of our employees. We were awarded a no-bid contract at a very large facility to cut and remove a very large section of their outdoor slab because it had cracked. This was routine for us, we could do it in our sleep, but it was still a large project. The reason we were given the contract, but not held to a number, was because they wanted it done right and fast and they knew that we were the guys to do this even though we aren't always the cheapest. The customer requested us to bring extra equipment and specialized saws just in case. Important later, the day comes that we are supposed to start and they wanted us on site at 6:30 a.m. for a safety meeting. Brad and Cody went out while I stayed back to get my crews ready for the day before heading out to meet them. When I arrived at 8 a.m., they were still standing by their trucks just talking. I asked them how the safety meeting went and they said that no one had shown up yet. Finally they got there at around 9 a.m. and didn't even acknowledge that they were late. We met the guy that was in charge of the project. His name was John. John said during the safety meeting that there would always be a few people around from his company to watch us while we worked. We figured it was weird, but no big deal. We ran a routine safety meeting after and it was time to work. We got about a third of the project completed in one day. The entire time we were working there were no less than 25 people standing around watching us work. We kept joking with them to just set up bleachers, it would be easier to watch that way. They made us call it quits at 4 p.m. so they could go home. Right about this time we started to figure there was something up with these guys. They didn't care that we didn't get started until late and wanted us to end early, yet a big part of us being there was to get it done fast. Either way we figured we would still be able to get done in about 3 days and make record time for a project of this size, all while making a fair amount of money for ourselves. The next morning as we were getting ready to head out for the day, Brad received an email. It said, while we can tell that X company are master operators with their machines, we feel as if they are operating in an unsafe manner by running multiple machines at once and request that they slow down to maintain safe working conditions. They also didn't try to make sure our supervisors felt that they were safe throughout the day. Brad was pissed. We were called in to get things done fast and not once had we done a single thing that could be considered unsafe. When we got to the job that day for the safety meeting, Brad had changed from "screw these guys, they don't know anything about what we are doing" to "okay, we are too fast. We will slow it right down for them." At the safety meeting John, same guy who sent us the email, looked at us and said, "Okay, everyone knows what we are doing, let's get it done." He tried to end the safety meeting with that, but that's when my boss spoke up. He said, "Hold on, since no one is man enough to tell us in person and just want to hide behind their emails, let's get this straight. We are too fast and unsafe for you?" John became visibly uncomfortable and stammered out, "Well, there was a lot of people standing around and watching you yesterday and I just felt that someone would get hurt if they decided to get closer to watch. I had set up safety cones with red danger tape strung between it and told no one to cross. We had taken proper safety precautions. If they didn't feel comfortable to have that many people watch, then don't have that many people standing, watching, and doing nothing." All Brad said was, "Okay, we will be real slow and if someone crosses our line, we shut the site down for an hour for another safety meeting. Time for the malicious compliance." We started up for the day. Something to note about our saws, tractors, and other heavy equipment is that we have the ability to turn up the idle, or in other words we can turn up or down the speed of the motors, so instead of everything moving normally and how it should, which is fast, everything is moving at turtle speed. Brad told us all that if we ever sped up our machines that he would kick us off the job, even Cody, his business partner. I was cutting with our saw while Cody was in the excavator to remove the pieces that I cut. Brad was in the skid steer to haul the pieces to the dump truck. I would cut the concrete into a 6-foot by 6-foot piece, which would normally take me about 20 to 30 minutes. It was taking upwards of 3 hours for one piece. After I would cut, Cody in the excavator would turn his machine on, slowly turn and stop. Extend his bucket. Stop. Lower the bucket. Stop. Tilt the bucket. Stop. Pick up the piece. Stop. Turn. Stop. Drop the piece. Stop. Shut off his machine. All without idling up. Then Brad would start his machine and repeat the same process to load into the dump truck. You get the point, it was painfully slow. After the first piece was ready to be pulled out and Cody started the process, John, who was just sitting on the sideline pale-faced, crossed my line to ask if we were really serious. At that point Brad screamed shut down. And we all stepped away for an hour for a safety meeting. John crossed the line 3 times in the first day and 8 times total throughout the project. His employees never once crossed the danger line. Effectively, John was the only one he should have been worried about in his email about getting too close and being in danger. John kept saying, "No way, you guys are being serious. What happened to what you were doing yesterday? You were so much more efficient." Brad just said, "I have in writing that you felt unsafe." So for the remainder of this project we will be operating at a safe pace. It ended up taking us 3 weeks to finish at that horribly slow pace instead of 3 or 4 days at full speed. The best part? The head of the facility came out to see what was taking us so long. We showed him the email and he agreed with what we were doing. He told us he hates John and that he's insufferable to work around. He said that the success of this project is directly tied to John's yearly bonus. He asked how much we were charging them, and we told him that per piece of equipment and truck and saw that is won the site is being billed to them by the hour, and that John had requested that we have nearly double the amount of equipment than we actually needed or used. The facility head just laughed and said, "Fantastic, I will make sure you are paid in full, don't go easy on us with the bill." That's how we maliciously complied our way into charging about $200,000 for a job that should have realistically only been worth about $45,000. I even got a solid $20,000 bonus because Brad and Cody are fantastic bosses and knew we made a killing on that job. Update: I felt like I wanted to clarify a couple of things after reading the comments. First, yes, John tried to get us to go back to our previous working rate, but he would only ever verbally ask. My boss kept telling him, "I need that in writing and you have a deal. Hell, might even save yourself some money while you're at it." But John either never understood what he was implying or really didn't want to send an email recanting his statement, believing he would look dumb for making a mistake. Second, this was a big project, bigger than what my part in it was. That being said, with how John was with us, I would seriously doubt every other aspect of the job went smooth for him. I bet they ended up with some profit, but not nearly as much as they would have without John. Meaning he still probably got a bonus, just a very small one. Third, how did they have so many people able to stand around and watch for 3 weeks and not work? Well, by the end of the 3rd week there was probably only 10 people watching us by then, but this was a facility that has hundreds of people working there, so for 25 people at a time to sneak out for most of a day to watch us wasn't too big of a deal for them. They usually rotated, and if we saw someone one day, then we didn't usually see them again for about a week. Also, just another little satisfying part of the story I should have included was that Cody has had a saying since the very first time I worked with him. He says, "We aren't trying to retire off of this one single job, we are treating the customer fair, but fair isn't always cheap." After the facility head gave us the go-ahead to charge what was needed and not take it easy, Cody looked at us and said, "Yep, we are retiring off of this one." Obviously it was more of a joke. But the satisfaction I got from hearing him say that after knowing him for 10 years to be the guy who is extra fair will never be rivaled. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me. Story 7. You wrote the rules. This goes back to my days working at a large public transit authority. They stressed safety at every point related to moving buses, particularly within the depot and outside parking lots. We had 250 buses. As you can imagine, moving large vehicles around in tight spaces can be hard on buses, infrastructure, and people. The layout for our outside lot required about 50 buses to be backed in 2 rows of 25 nose to tail. Rules required that when backing a bus we always had to have a backup helper. For obvious reasons, backing 15-ton vehicles into other 15-ton vehicles can lead to mayhem, especially after dark and in poor weather. Management decided they didn't want to pay someone to stand around and do this. There were 6 shifters, operators working the yard to move buses after they pulled in, parked for the night, or moved to maintenance. Rules state you never leave a bus unattended. If it's running, someone is in the seat. First night, first bus goes outside and calls the yard dispatcher for help. Yard dispatcher ignores them. Next bus, same thing. After the 6th bus arrives in the yard waiting for backup help, the line for pull-ins was 10 deep around the block and all the shifters were in the yard. The neighborhood hates the depot anyway. Calls to police begin about buses blocking the streets. Yard dispatcher is flipping out. The backup guy was back within the hour. On overtime for the balance of the pick, about 3 months, since management had eliminated the job. It usually went to an operator on restricted duty for whatever reason. They wrote the rules. Not our job to ignore them. Thank you for tuning in. Kindly subscribe the channel and support me to keep me motivated for creating content and bringing it to you for your entertainment. And while you're at it, click the notification as well. This is all for now. See you again in the next video.